We have no-show jobs. We have, without question, one big beast that keeps sucking up money.
That's a debate we're going to try to bring you later in our schedule. Now, a debate for West Virginia Senate seat. It got underway just a moment ago. The moderator is University of Journalism School, Mary Ann Reed with West Virginia University.
For you. Thank you. I want you to understand what you just heard from two politicians. What the two politicians said was, I'm going to be governor, actually three if we count Jimmy. They said, give me control of the MTA.
Per question, which I will direct. The opening question, however, is an exception. It is directed to all candidates, and each person will have 1 minute to respond. If time allows, each candidate will be asked to give a closing statement at the end of the program. My role as moderator is to make sure that the candidates adhere to the agreed upon time limits and to keep the discussion moving. Now, we're going to ask the first question in the order in which the candidates are seated, beginning with Governor Manchin, and we will reverse this order for closing statements. The candidates have not been given the questions in advance of tonight's debate. Now to our first question, addressed by Melanie Hoffman to all candidates.
This has been a particularly negative campaign, nationally and here in West Virginia. If you're elected to the U.S. Senate, what positive changes will you make to not only improve the lives of Americans, but especially the citizens of West Virginia?
We'll do the same as we did in West Virginia. 6 years ago, I became governor, and I asked for the support of the people of West Virginia because I knew we could do better. And we did. We brought all the sides together. We put our party aside. We didn't put politics. We put our special interests at the door, and we started looking at all the problems and challenges we had. 6 years later, we're recognized as one of the best states in the nation right now as far as how we run our affairs, the finances, how we're paying our bills, cutting our taxes, cutting food tax in half. And we need to bring this country together. Right now in Washington, people are upset. They see what's going on, and they're putting their party first. Democrats and Republicans are both wrong at this. They put their special interest second and the country third. We need to do the same in Washington. That's what I intend when I go there, to do the same as we did in West Virginia. And the success will be there, but you must put this country first, the same as we did West Virginia.
Thank you. Mr. Becker.
I think we need to get back to our founding principles. Our Declaration of Independence was the promise, and our Constitution was the fulfillment of that promise. And I think we need a renewed interest in American civics and studying history. We need to pay attention to the wisdom of our founders, and the Constitution was a compact among the states, so we need to get, and the Senate was intended to represent the states in federal Congress. So I think we need to really get back to this issue of federalism, the state-federal relationship, where rather than having U.S. senators being a fourth and fifth representative for West Virginia and being responsive to the people, I think our senators need to be working more with the state legislature and helping the state legislature get their needs met in Congress.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Well, I believe that the negativity that all people across the nation, as well as the people in West Virginia, are experiencing as a result of our real lack of fairness in our electoral process today. We're faced with a great need for media reform and taking the money out of that. We're faced with a tremendous need for the public financing of our elections so that we have a level playing field and everyone has the same amount of money to proffer their points of view for the confluence of ideas to the American public. I believe that this is crucial for our national security, frankly. Facing what we've experienced last January with the Citizens United Act has put us in a very precarious situation for intervention from multinational corporations abroad. And I believe that One of the key things that I want to focus on in the Senate is the passage of the Disclosure Act as a jumping off point. But there really needs to be the public financing of elections. We see it working very well in Arizona and Maine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Racy.
Thank you very much. I don't know how we couldn't be negative in this country right now, because when you look at the unemployment situation in the United States, it is almost at catastrophic portions. And you look at a figure of 9.5, ranging all the way almost to 17 to 18% unemployment. This is unacceptable. It's one a lot of people, I think, are agitated and angry. One of my, I think, planks is that what I want to do in the United States Senate is to bring back a spirit of America in this country. It's called capitalism and free enterprise. My forte is creating jobs. And when I see the Obama administration, when you have laws like Obamacare, for instance, that will destroy our health care system, when I see a situation like cap and trade, which is so bad for West Virginia, and when I see things like card check, when you look at TARP, when you look at the stimulus program that has failed America, these are programs that we need to change in this country. And one of the things that I think that I can do, I can bring the spirit of capitalism and free enterprise to the United States Senate to make a positive change for this country, instead of following this line that has led us to failure after failure. I think we have a great opportunity in West Virginia, certainly a great opportunity in the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Racy. And now to our next question. Lawrence Messina actually has the next question for Mr. Racy.
Mr. Racy, the late Senator Byrd was known for bringing federal funds and federal jobs to West Virginia. You generally oppose the government's current role in the economy and would seek to abolish earmarks as well as the minimum wage. Under what circumstances, if any, would you pursue public dollars for West Virginia if elected?
Well, I think you bring up a good point when you say let's abolish earmarks, because as you know, since 1994, there have been 90,000 earmarks. And what it does really is that it creates what are called career politicians. And I think that's one of the problems. And you'd mentioned certainly Senator Byrd and his ability when you look at earmarks, and as we know in West Virginia, bringing back a lot of federal money. My question moving forward, is that the best answer for the problems of West Virginia? I don't think it's the best answer for the problems of West Virginia, because I believe that when you teach a man to fish, that he eats for a lifetime. But if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. I want to bring back the spirit of capitalism. Capitalism requires the limitation of government powers and puts a limit on government powers to create the freedom of an individual. And I think it's very important that we do create those freedoms. And let's start looking at programs that make sense for America and make sense for certainly West Virginia. I'd like to start cutting taxes. I'd like to quit absolutely printing money. And I think today we have to have a regulatory reform bill that puts West Virginia and America first again.
Time for rebuttals. Would you like to go, Governor Manchin?
Please. On that, so-called earmarks, basically, infrastructure is where, if you looked at the times that we've had difficult times in this country, infrastructure is where Roosevelt had gone. It's where President Eisenhower had gone as far as the interstate system. In West Virginia being a rural state, one of the most rural states, water, sewerage, infrastructure as far as roads, broadband and high speed in today's technology world. Those are things that basically the free enterprise system is not going to go. They're only going to go where the market is. And for all of us to have an opportunity, there has to be a partnership. The federal government and state government should be your partner, not your provider. But in areas where there's not a market and there's not going to be enough people, but we want to develop the state, there has to be that partnership. So I also think that I recall when they said that Senator Byrd brought the FBI Center up in Clarksburg. Now we see 10 years fast forward that it's one of the most progressive, it's one of the most cost savings, efficient pieces of federal government that they have. It's even done so well that the Department of Defense is expanding there. Low turnover, great workforce, dedicated and committed workforce. So you have to look at basically what are the returns on the money that's invested. And it should be transparent. If it's transparent, the thing I think people are upset about, no one knows where and who's making the earmark and what it's being used for. But if it's transparent, you're saying we're going to build a road or water line or sewer line, we're going to give people an opportunity to live a quality of life. I think those things that should be looked into.
Mr. Johnson, would you like to respond?
Yes. this country, and we all learned from grade school, is an amalgam. This country is a melting pot of race and religion and ethnic background, and we are also an amalgam when it comes to who we are. And Robert C. Byrd certainly stood up for the Constitution, and the Constitution dictates and spreads the promise of this country that is not just capitalist, but we have socialistic constructs as well that are intrinsic to our identity. Our success in the 20th century is born of the fact that we have firemen, we have police officers, we have a military, we have a tremendous infrastructure, and if we were purely based on capitalism, we would not have that alone. We are an organic country of great promise, and that's what we have to keep in mind, and that's what we have to get back to, and that's what we have to preserve against all of these different imbalances.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Becker, do you have a comment?
My only concern is that with earmarks, you have U.S. Senate candidates using those as part of a way of vote getting. Now, prior to the 17th Amendment, U.S. senators were appointed, or they were chosen by their state legislature. Imagine if we went back, if we went back to that situation, and Democrat Senator Zell Miller advocated this, repealing the 17th Amendment, where the U.S. senators were responsive only to the state legislature, and the earmarks would not be used for votes. So it would reduce that.
Okay. Thank you. We need to move on to the next question. Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Mike Meyer, and it is directed to Mr. Manchin.
Governor Manchin, what would you do as senator to help rein in the federal deficit, which is now running at about $1.3 trillion?
The same as I did as governor. Coming to the state, I knew we were in trouble, and I said we could do better, and we did. We started looking at the debt, the unmanaged debt that we had, the unfunded liabilities that we had, and started bringing all those under control by bringing people together and putting West Virginia first. A balanced budget amendment is needed in the federal government. It truly is, and only two exceptions would be in case of a national emergency or an act of war. But other than that, it seems like there's no way that they can discipline themselves. We as governors live with the balanced budget amendments. It's worked quite well for West Virginia. But that must be done and should be done very quickly. The debt that we're amassing right now is unconscionable, and it's something that your children and grandchildren aren't going to be able to live with. We knew that in West Virginia. And fast forward with Cato Institute saying that West Virginia is the third best run state in the nation right now, fiscally responsible. Wall Street Journal has praised what we have done. But we've been disciplined. We knew that we could live within our means. People in West Virginia every day have to make decisions. We should be held to the same. And this government has to be held to the same. This runaway spending must stop. And it will stop with the balanced budget amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Racy, would you like to respond?
Well, I certainly would concur with the balanced budget amendment, but I would also like to remind Governor Manchin that Governor Manchin is for stimulus here in the country. And when you look at stimulus today, we're looking at almost $780 billion worth of failed progress, or let's say supposed progress by Barack Obama. Mr. Manchin has accepted 1.4. He's already used $500 million. So if this is his idea of a way to save and to cut spending, then it's rather odd to me.
Mr. Manchin, would you like to address the issue of stimulus?
I would like to respond back there. The stimulus, basically, the country is in a free-for-all. I'm not here blaming President Bush's administration. I'm not here blaming President Obama. We need to fix it. Now, the bottom line is that we had all of the states that were falling through except West Virginia. The stimulus package was passed. We have been criticized. I've been criticized for not spending all the stimulus quick enough. We shored up because we knew it would come to an end. We did not support the second round of stimulus and do not. The bottom line is people have become so dependent, and a dependent mentality means everyone's waiting on someone to take care of it. In West Virginia, we don't do that. We're able to take care of ourselves.
Something that neither of you addressed, and maybe both of you or the other candidates could address, is the issue of tax cuts regarding the deficit. And in particular, where do you stand on the proposed repeal of the Bush administration's tax cut for people who make, families who make $250,000 or more?
Well, I'm for the tax cut straight across the board, and I'm also for making them permanent. And I think it's very important, not just extending them, but making them permanent. But always remember that the Democrats left Washington right now without the opportunity for a lot of people to vote on those extensions. I find that very concerning because we're going into a lame duck session, who's ever elected here from West Virginia, and in those 2 months we'll be making a decision. But what it really is the largest tax increase in the history of the United States. I find that concerning. So I want to make the Bush tax cuts permanent. I certainly have felt that way from the get-go, and certainly when you look at Mr. Manchin's record and certainly Mr. Obama's record, Mr. Manchin hadn't commented much about the tax cuts until practically a month ago. So my record is very clear. I've supported the tax cuts all along, and certainly we'd like to make them permanent.
All right, well, let me address Mr. Manchin. Specifically, Mr. Manchin.
I think my
Mr.
record
Manchin, where do you stand on repealing the tax for families who make $250,000 or above?
I don't think during a time of recession you mess with any of the taxes or increase any taxes. When I became governor, and as my opponent says, that I have a record that speaks for itself because we have cut taxes in West Virginia an unheard of amount. In 4 years, $235 million of cuts. Unbelievable. And this is for all of our citizens and businesses. We did that when I first came in and we start looking. They said, oh, we might need to have to raise taxes. I said, I can't look the people in West Virginia in the eye and ask them to pay a penny more until I know we're running this government efficient. And we did that. And you know what? Within 1 year, we were able to start reducing taxes, and we haven't stopped yet. We have a proven record that it works.
Mr. Johnson, would you like to respond?
Yes, I'm adamantly against the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy, and I see different options, and that's why I'm here. There are different options to look at in regards to, whittling down our debt and the deficit. First of all is our bloated military spending. When $1 in $3 are going to the Department of Defense, which happens to be one of 24 agencies, or one of two of the 24 agencies that, according to the 2009 GAO, are not accountable. This is a very serious issue when we have no conventional enemies, that we're dealing with. We are not at war and have not declared a war since the Second World War. However, when we look at this, one of the ideas that I would suggest that we look at very closely is what has happened in the last 20 years with the derivative market. We've gone from no derivative market to a debt that's nearly $700 trillion, and now this is greater than the entire global GDP. If we had a 1% transaction fee, both at the front and the back of this, we could start whittling it down, and we could provide universal health care for all citizens in this nation, which, in my interpretation of the Constitution, is a right.
Mr. Becker, can you respond?
Yes, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution gives very specific and limited powers to the federal government. Most of these federal departments really are not authorized by the Constitution. We need to look at these and phase them out. I know people are employed by the government, but we need to phase out as many of these federal programs as we can. The Republicans campaigned on this in 1994 with the contract with America, and they did not do what they said they would do. They blamed the Democrats. Now the Republicans have this, what is it called, John? The Pledge for America?
Yes.
And it has, it begins with, on page 33, I've read it, it begins with a request or a demand to have each piece of legislation begin with a statement of constitutional authority. But the interesting thing is, we already have that in Congress. It's the House of Representatives has their own rule, Rule 8, Section 3D1.
We need to wrap that up, please.
So we need to, Republicans haven't followed this, and the Democrats don't do it either. They waive their own rule to follow the Constitution.
Thank you very much. We need to go on to the next question. John Hingsbergen has our next question for Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, as you know, coal mining is perhaps the most important industry for West Virginia, but it's also blamed for many environmental problems. What is your position on the proposed cap and trade legislation that would restrict carbon emissions from burning coal?
Well, I'm certainly in favor of the restriction of carbon emissions. We shouldn't be dealing with carbon emissions to begin with on that level. What worries me about the cap and trade bill is the trade element, as I was describing with the derivative market that has ballooned up and wrecked our economy, frankly. The trade element of that bill creates a whole new unregulated market for giant corporations, and that is a very serious future drain to the American coffers and worldwide. Coal mining is essential to West Virginia, but I have proffered since 2004 a change away, first of all, stop mountaintop removal immediately. It's disastrous and it kills jobs. Then transition away from burning coal. We're wasting a valuable non-renewable resource that West Virginia University itself identified more than 5,000 products years ago, more than 20 years ago, that we can manufacture in that sense. I am proffering and have proffered since 2004 a new coal economy based on carbon manufacturing, to rebuild manufacturing in the state of West Virginia, birth it here, and rebuild the middle class in America and start it from the hills and hollows of West Virginia. This can be done, and it can be done now if we had the political will and someone who would stand up on the floor of the United States Senate and fight for it, and I'll do that.
Mr. Racy, you oppose cap and trade for, I think, perhaps for some different reasons. Would you like to elaborate?
Yes, I do oppose cap and trade. Cap and trade would be disastrous for this country, and it would also be disastrous for West Virginia. But you know, cap and trade's not about the environment. It's about controlling manufacturing in this country. When you really look at the essence of CO2 release in this world today, if you take all the Atlantic oceans and if you take all the oceans in the world, they emit and evaporate 185 billion tons worth of CO2. If you take everything that man makes, it's only 6 billion. So it really doesn't make any sense. But when you look at the scenario here in the state of West Virginia and the myth, and I say myth, that there is global warming, and then the other myth that man causes that global warming, I think that really differentiates me from other candidates, certainly here at the front table today, because I don't believe in that myth. I think that what we have to do is find more coal, more accessible coal, and have the permit work in a much easier state and fashion so we can really start growing this country with its natural resources.
Mr. Manchin, would you like to respond?
I respectfully disagree with President Obama. He is dead wrong on cap and trade. It would be the ruin not only of our state of West Virginia, but this entire economy for this country. With that being said, coal produces about 50% of the energy. Coal has built this country what it is today because it's been dependable, reliable, and affordable, and it's domestic. If you want security in this nation, you want this nation to be strong and secure, you have to quit buying the oil and the products that other countries are using the money against us. If you want to stop Iran from a nuclear armament, then basically quit buying their product. We need to mine every lump of coal we can in a balance with our economy and the environment. We need to extract our gas and oil. We need to develop our renewables. We need to do everything possible in West Virginia to be totally energy independent. That's how we're going to have a secured and a free and a strong nation.
Okay, quick question. I'm going to ask I'm sorry, would you like to go, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, once again, we keep going back to this coal for energy model. It's not required. More energy shines on the surface of this planet in one day than all of mankind consumes in a year. Back to geothermal, which I proffered in 2004. Now it's been noted that geothermal has greater potential for this state than coal mining and all the other sources combined. We have tremendous options and no political will in Washington or in the state of West Virginia to explore them and to incentivize them.
Mr. Racy, question for you. What solutions do you offer for the state and for the country for when the coal runs out?
Well, that when the coal runs out is a very interesting question, because when the coal runs out you're looking at almost 200 years of reserve in this country. I think that's a pretty big question, but I think the real question is what is the myth, and behind the myth, that CO2 and global warming is all manufactured about man and certainly about burning of coal. I don't agree with that myth, and I know other people, it's certainly Governor Manchin agrees or doesn't agree, because Governor Manchin believes, as he stated before the Charleston Daily Mail, that he does believe that global warming is caused by man and the fact that we do have global warming, and that's where he and I have a difference. I don't believe that.
Governor Manchin, what is your position on what the state and the country should do when the coal runs out?
Well, basically, I think the coal is in this transition period, which we know could be 30 or 50 years. I think everyone agrees until there's affordable, reliable, and dependable fuel of the future, coal is going to be our base load. It's what we depend on. It's our go-to product. The rest of the world is using more coal than ever. China. And basically, they're keeping their prices low. They're taking our jobs from us. It's just awful what's happening there, and we can't compete with a higher price of energy until we're able to transition. Now, with that being said, you don't leave your coal base. You don't leave your base fuel, and there's nothing to replace it with. So as it transitions, there will be a fuel of the future, I'm sure. There's a lot of technology. I think it should be done right here in West Virginia. I know in West Virginia, we have the ability to, with the technology and through research, to help develop different ways to use coal in a more valued use, but also help develop the fuels of the future. Coal will be a mainstay for many, many years to come.
Okay. We need to move on to the next question. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. Lawrence Messina, you have the next question, and it is directed to Mr. Manchin.
Despite the recent federal mine safety legislation passed in the wake of the Sago mine disaster, just 6 months ago, 29 miners were killed in the Upper Big Branch disaster. If you were elected, what more would you have Congress do to prevent and protect coal miners against these kinds of disasters?
As you know, safety of our miners is the most paramount thing in my mind, and basically I have sat through too many tragedies, and I never want to do that again. But the bottom line that we speak of is, how do we have a safe workplace? And not just mining, but any workplace in America. What we have right now is with the Upper Big Branch investigation is still going on, the federal MSHA, the state, and also the independent that we had Abbott McAteer doing. We've been working and coordinating. Our office has been, our legal staff has been working, preparing legislation, basically with ventilation and how that should be controlled. What we have done in West Virginia, we have charged and challenged every miner to take control, to make sure that you're in a safe workplace. If not, stop. Make sure that you're not in harm's way, and any of your fellow workers. We've empowered them to do that. We have a hotline. We can't continue to have people in an unsafe situation and they see it and nothing is done or controlled about it. But until this investigation is completed, and we will have legislation prepared on the state level, moving on to the federal level, we will be prepared to take that also and coordinate that with the states. And that's what we did with our Sago after the Sago and Aracoma mine disaster. We did that with our safety, and we will do that after the Upper Big Branch investigation is completed.
Mr. Johnson, we cut you off earlier. Would you like to respond?
Well, first I wanted to respond to the 200 years. That's minus the exponential function as to how we're decapitating our mountains and consuming coal and energy at a greater accelerated rate via our present model. Tomorrow, the future starts tomorrow. And that is the moment that we walk out of here. Governor Manchin is talking about coal and in regards to mine health and safety. I think that what we really have to look at is proper application of regulation, and that's not being proffered so at this time on the state or the federal level, or we wouldn't be having the situation looking to the EPA to enforce our laws. Former Congressman Ken Heckler, who has endorsed me, wrote the Mine Health and Safety Act of 1969, and had it been followed, having 9,000 cubic foot of air, they're ventilating that mine, then this so-called acts of God, which are most of our mining tragedies always are chalked up to be, would never have happened. Mining, deep mining, is safe as long as it is done properly. We have perfected that here in West Virginia and around the world for years. Plus, there are many possibilities, once again, with carbon to utilize safety pods, et cetera, and many of these walls that are even being processed and built here in West Virginia and Putnam County are being shipped abroad. This is a huge opportunity for us, and as I said, the future starts tomorrow.
Mr. Racy, would you like to address the issue of legislation for mine safety?
Well, I agree with Governor Manchin that we have to wait until all studies are in before we can really formulate the plan of attack. But I'm concerned about the Obama administration and his direction that he's going against coal and certainly coal-fired power plants. I'm concerned right now for the safety of our miners because a lot of times when you see Washington, they don't really have the best concern of a lot of the things that we do in the mining business. For instance, I'm in the mining business. I'm in the coal mining business. I'm certainly in the limestone mining business. You know, I have never in my life ever been asked by any bureaucrat ever about my input into safety, my input into what we can do. I find that rather odd. And my family, as I say, have been in the mining business for over 97 years. We've never been asked. I'd like to see more of the private sector involved, miners involved, people that are experienced at what we do, instead of a lot of Washington bureaucrats like we're seeing today.
Okay, thank you very much. On to our next question. Melanie Hoffman, your next question is directed to Mr. Becker.
As a former member of the Air National Guard and as a member of the Constitution Party, what is your position on the continued buildup of American troops in Afghanistan?
I think we need to first take a look at what happened on September 11th. There were actually 3 buildings that collapsed on September 11th. World Trade Center 7 was 2 blocks away from the Twin Towers. I think this is important to consider because it was not rained on by any debris. It was just a 40-story building. And at 5 p.m. on 9/11, Jane Stanley, the reporter for the BBC, was standing right in front, and we're standing at ground zero, and reported that Building 7 had collapsed, when in fact, you could still see it over her shoulder. And then 20 minutes later, it did collapse. This is foreknowledge, and it needs to be investigated. Additionally, Larry Silverstein, the owner of World Trade Center 7 complex, before 9/11 had taken out a multi-billion-dollar insurance policy to protect his property against a terrorist attack. And then in 2002, on a PBS station interview, he said that he gave the order to pull it. Pull it is a controlled demolition term. More evidence of foreknowledge. These are facts. You can watch the interview. You can look. You can get the BBC footage. How did the British know 20 minutes ahead of time that this was going to happen? This needs to be investigated. There is a preponderance of anomalies surrounding the events on 9/11. Architects and engineers, over 1,000 degreed and licensed architects and engineers have looked at the information, and there's so much information that needs to be, that doesn't make sense with the official story. The only way for the official story to make sense is if the laws of physics had changed on that day. And I'm an engineer, and I can tell you that they did not change.
Mr. Becker, I need to move on and also ask. I'm going to ask Governor Manchin the question I asked originally, which is, what is your position on the buildup of troops in Afghanistan?
I support the commander's decision for the buildup, and the president followed that recommendation. And with that, we must support our troops, and we must give them the needed support they will have in order to complete their mission. You have to listen to your front field commanders, and I think pay attention. We can all sit here and surmise what could have and should have and would have, but that's not the case. We have our young men and women in harm's way. We have too many of our National Guard. I see too many of them off, and I'm there when they come back. And sometimes they don't always return. And that's the most devastating loss when a person gives their life for us, and for me to look at that family and go in there and thank them for the sacrifice they have made, because it's an entire family that's devastated with this. With that being said, we must support, and we must make sure that they're safe. We must make sure that they have all the support they need and return home safe.
I'd like to ask either Mr. Racy or Mr. Johnson if they would like to respond to that question.
Yes, I would. I think Governor Manchin might have it a little bit wrong, because when General McChrystal requested troops, he got troops. He only got 70% of the troops. Once again, Obama did not listen to his generals. I think that when you have when you have a war as such, you have to listen to your generals, and when they request the armament and when they request the troops, you have to do it 100%. My philosophy has always been very simple. We win, you lose.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Jesse? Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Yes. Well, I think what we need to keep in mind is that this is all the result of pursuit of empire, to be the policeman of the world. And I think that's just rather dangerous folly. And we can see, as I said, when 1 in 3 of our dollars are going to this defense mode or model, and we have a crumbling infrastructure of roads and bridges and a lack of public transportation that is efficient in this nation, that we need to consider that we perhaps should not be in these excursions abroad, and that it's truly not making us any safer, and in the process we're giving up our civil liberties. You know, I mean, when we consider the deaths of 9/11, and I'm not making light of that, but I also a sheer fact is that in our healthcare model, sloppy penmanship kills 7,000 people per year.
Speaking of healthcare, we need to move to our next question. Thank you. And Mike Meyer will be asking the question initially of Mr. Racy.
Mr. Racy, you have said that you want to repeal the healthcare legislation Congress passed earlier this year. What is it about this new law specifically that you do not like?
Well, I don't like socialism, to tell you the truth. And when you have a doctor-patient relationship, that's the way it's supposed to be, and that's the way we have the greatest healthcare system in the world, and that's the way it is right now. That's all going to change, because from here on out, under Obamacare, something that Governor Manchin has always supported, you're going to have a patient-bureaucrat relationship, because the first person that patient has to go to is a bureaucrat. That is called a panel. I disagree with it. I disagree with the fact that it has 20 new taxes in it. I disagree with the fact that you have over 189 new federal agencies that are going to go with it. I disagree with the fact that you're going to see insurance companies and doctors come under the penmanship of the federal government. I disagree with all of that. What I'd like to do, I'd like to repeal every part of it, because it is pure, unadulterated socialism. It is the worst bill that has ever come out of the United States Senate and House. I think right now, when you look at the gross domestic product in this country with Obamacare, you're looking at the fact that we're over almost 51% of the GDP in this country will be controlled by the federal government. Unacceptable.
Mr. Manchin, I'd like to give you a chance to respond, and I want to ask you a question. I do want to address what Mr. Racy said, is that in that you did come out in support of healthcare legislation, healthcare reform in the spring, and now you've seemed to distance yourself from it. And my question to you is, why the change, and is there anything good in this legislation for West Virginia?
Yes, there is. I'm not prepared to scrap the entire bill. There's parts that need change. There are parts that need repealed. I'm sure of that, and we have never passed a piece of perfect legislation. There's going to have a lot of work to be done. But let me tell you, I'm not prepared to tell your child who had a pre-existing condition that he or she can't be covered. I'm not prepared to tell somebody who might have had cancer or black lung that I'm sorry, you can't buy insurance. I'm not prepared to tell somebody that had a cap on their insurance policy, I'm sorry, you're too sick, we can't pay anymore. Or the donut hole being filled for our seniors. There's a lot of good in the bill that basically Democrats and Republicans agree with. That's a pretty good start. That's how we do things in West Virginia. We ought to try to fix what we have. If we can't fix it, then start it. But you don't go up there with basically starting and repealing everything. It just doesn't work that way. And the bottom line is, there are things that people depend on. And there are things that people have been denied. And there's a people that can't afford. And they need the basic care of health care. Working people are the ones left in the cold. A working person today is the one most vulnerable in our society. If you're old enough, you have some form called Medicare. If you're poor enough, it's Medicaid. If you're a child, it's a CHIPS program. If you're incarcerated, the courts make us give it to you. But if you're getting up every day and going to work, you're probably the most vulnerable part of our society. That has to change.
Mr. Manchin, what parts of the bill would you repeal?
There's 3 parts that I can go to immediately. 1099 provision, that is so onerous to small businesses, that has to be repealed. Basically the mandates, it's not who we are as a people in West Virginia. And also the firewall situation to where it's not protecting basically the abortion and it's allowing states to make those decisions. Those are 3 specific parts that need to be repealed.
Mr. Becker, would you like to respond?
Yes, our healthcare problems in this country are largely the result of skyrocketing health insurance costs, and those are the result of what's known as the McCarran-Ferguson Act, which was a 1945 act of, it was Public Law 15. And what it did was, this is amazing, it exempted the insurance companies from the Sherman Antitrust Acts. And the reason that it did that was there was a court ruling, a bad Supreme Court ruling, that ruled that insurance was not commerce. It had to do with the Interstate Commerce Clause. Well, of course insurance is commerce. They're corporations, they're for-profit business. And now there have been attempts to try to repeal the McCarran-Ferguson Act, Trent Lott and Patrick Leahy about 5 years ago, and it failed in the Senate. And now, just this past February, the House passed a repeal bill, over 400 votes for repealing it. And now there's a companion bill in the Senate, and I will support that vigorously. This needs to be repealed. It's ridiculous that any company or corporation should be repealed, should be exempted from antitrust. The AMA did a study I read. In the past 14 years, some 400 health insurers have merged. Well, that means they can fix prices. We need to strike the root here.
A very short response, Mr. Johnson?
Well, I'm consistently stunned that this Healthcare Act is characterized as socialism. It's not socialism at all. It's capitalism on steroids. You're having to pay to a private corporation, and you're under penalty of law for not doing so. This is not socialism by any stretch of the imagination. I am disturbed by the fact that it was drawn behind closed doors, much as Cheney's energy bill was, with great giveaways to the prescription drug industry as well as the healthcare or health insurance industry. And when you consider that, in 2001, Pfizer was the #1 most profitable company on the Fortune 500, at $7.8 billion that year. And more profits than all of the other Fortune 500s in home building, apparel, railroad, and publishing combined. This is extremely dangerous. And as I mentioned before, 7,000 people die from sloppy penmanship in healthcare.
Okay, thank you.
Per year.
Thank you. We need to go to our next question. We go back to Mr. Hingsbergen for his question.
Through West Virginia Public Broadcasting's Facebook page, we invited the public to submit some questions for this debate, and Mr. Jim Kirk of Cabell County offered this question for Mr. Manchin. And Mr. Kirk writes, in your campaign, you have embraced many issues that are traditionally associated with the Republican Party. Your opposition to climate change legislation and the recently enacted health care bill are a couple of examples. Can you identify any issues you support that would be cause for Democrats to support you?
Absolutely. Social Security. I am not for privatizing Social Security because there are so many West Virginians that depend on it. We have 55% of our seniors. And I believe that is something that we can prioritize and fix. I truly believe that. And if that would have been privatized, if it had been thrown into the private markets, with the downfall or the downturn of the financial markets, 40% of their values would have been lost. We'd have had 55% of our seniors thrown into poverty. That can't be done. Minimum wage. I believe in the minimum wage. I have fought for that, and I believe it is. It's basically helping people have a balance or have a basement or a floor, if you will, so that there is some dignity and some reward. If you put that out to the market, it's going to fluctuate to where how low is low enough. You have Medicare. And I believe in Medicare. I believe that basically every time this country got into trouble, every time that we hit the bottom, it's the Democrats that stood up and helped people. The average person, people struggling to make it, people trying to take care of their families. I believe very strongly in that. But I'm more of a centrist, and in fiscal matters, I am conservative on fiscal matters, and I think it's fared well bringing people together, making sure we didn't put burdens on people they couldn't afford. We've kept our financial house in order. We're in much better shape. But when it's time to help people, we're always there. But I believe people should help themselves too if they're capable of. So the entitlement programs, the expansion of entitlements, I'm not a big proponent of that, never have been. But I believe in giving a helping hand. I've always done that because I really can't take care of the people who truly need it if I don't.
Okay, this is actually, Mr. Manchin, it's a two-part question, and I want to have Mr. Hangsbergen ask part two.
Okay, this part is for Mr. Racy. Mr. Kirk of Cabell County asks, in light of your opposition to setting a minimum wage, how would your policies prevent a further slide in middle-class income?
Well, my opposition to minimum wage is that I don't agree with minimum wage because I think that minimum wage is something that nobody can live on. I think it's too low. I don't like government setting price controls. I don't like government setting wage controls. I want a better wage for everybody. And in order to get a better wage for everybody, we have, in this country, we have to start lifting jobs and manufacturing where they should be. Not like Manchin and Obama. They enjoy people working for $7.25. Quite frankly, I don't. And I think that when you create the demand, and that's a very important word here, it's called demand. Demand in this country right now with certainly the Obama policies is running a large unemployment line right now. And as we know, minimum wage is one of the worst things possible for unemployment. So I'd like to raise the level of the playing field because we need to set a environment that creates jobs in this country by cutting taxes, cutting spending, and putting American manufacturing first again. And unless we do that, we're always going to be mired in how low can we go. I'm exactly opposite of that. I'm very positive on how high we can go, and I know a lot about creating jobs. In my lifetime, I've created a lot of them.
Since we have time a little left before our closing statements, I'm going to ask another question specifically for Mr. Racy and Mr. Manchin. And that is, this election has in many ways become a referendum on President Obama and his administration. And my question is, why has President Obama become a focal point of this election in West Virginia, and should he be? Mr. Manchin, you can go first.
Well, I hate to inform my opponent, but Mr. Obama's name will not be on the ballot for the U.S. Senate in West Virginia. It'll be me. And my record has been very clear, and I've worked very hard. And bringing all sides together, Democrats and Republicans, Independents, Mountain Party, and Constitutional Party, everybody. The bottom line is that when they spend, and when this much money has been spent against me, trying to scare people, and we call it a fear and smear campaign, trying to scare people that I'm going to do things I've never done, that I'm going to let somebody control me or be a rubber stamp from somebody that I've never been. We would not have all of these people who endorse me. When you talk about the endorsements, after 6 years, we have all of the working people and all the labor. We have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, State Chamber of Commerce. We have the Coal Association, National Rifle Association. We have all of the health care providers, which would be the doctors and the nurses and the hospitals. These people don't endorse me because we agree on every issue. They're too diverse. They endorse me because we put a plan in place. They endorse the process of bringing people together and working out. I'm not a rubber stamp for anybody, never have been in my life. In the spirit of Senator Byrd, he didn't care who the president was. If they were wrong, they were wrong, no matter what political party. And I will operate in the same vein.
Mr. Racy, can you address the issue?
Well, that certainly sounds like a career politician to me. I'm not after special interest, and I'm sure that Governor Manchin prides himself on special interest. I'm not. The reason that we're concerned right now about what President Obama has done is that if you're in business today, I defy anybody to supply a business plan moving forward. It's virtually impossible. When you sit there and you look at Obamacare, when you sit there and look at the stimulus, when you sit there and look at taxation, the fact that we haven't made any decision whatsoever on the Bush tax cuts, when you sit there and look at cap and trade, even when you sit there and you look at Governor Manchin's support for a carbon tax, you have to wonder about Obama and Manchin and which direction that they're going, because there are choices in this election. And those choices, I think, are very clear. But when you look at business today, and that is the private sector, we are the people that supply and to motivate this country and bring this country together and make this country move. When you have people like Obama and certainly Manchin, you have to be concerned about the future of this country because they are together on all 5 of those issues and have been. I think West Virginia realizes and where these people have been and where the direction of this country is going. I'm a businessman, and once again, I think I know a little bit about supplying jobs and making jobs in this country.
I think we have to let Mr. Manchin respond.
Well, first of all, there's no cap and trade in West Virginia. and the bill that they refer to is the House Bill 103. That's using all of our energy that we have, every lump of coal we can mine. How would I have the Coal Association, the mine workers, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and State Chamber of Commerce supporting me, openly supporting me and endorsing me, if anything that we would have done in any legislation would have harmed anyone's livelihood? Doesn't make any sense at all. But if you have enough money and you can spend that much money to scare people and make them believe something that's absolutely false, that's what you get. Now, the bottom line that we have here to deal with is President Obama or President Bush. I'm an American. I want my presidents to succeed. I wanted President Bush to be the best he could possibly be. I'm an American. I want my country to succeed. And I will help whoever I can. I'm going up there to help. I'm bringing the successes we've had in West Virginia
Mr. Manchin,
to make this country better.
we need to actually go to closing statements, gentlemen, to allow everyone to have their last say. So we will be going in reverse order from our first question, which means that, Mr. Racy, you have 1 minute for a closing statement.
Thank you very much. I want to thank West Virginia Public Radio. I want to thank our panelists, and certainly I want to thank West Virginia for watching today, because this is a very crucial election. Who's ever elected up here is going to go into the special session, which is a 2-month lame duck session in the United States Senate. We have the Bush tax cuts out there, which I feel are very important. We need to make them permanent. We have cap and trade out there, which is a detriment to West Virginia. But most of all, we have a country right now that I think is going in the wrong direction. I'd like an opportunity to go to the United States Senate and put this country in the right direction, a country based on free enterprise, capitalism, and what has made this country great for a long, long time, and that's the spirit and the freedom of America. I want to see the United States rise again. 1
minute for your closing statement, Mr. Johnson.
Well, very quickly, considering the fact I didn't get to answer the last three or put in any involvement there, which I found some outrageous statements made on both sides of that. You know, I ask the public as I'm campaigning, are you sick enough yet? Are you sick enough yet? If not now, when? Everyone I know that I come in contact in the public, every citizen has a sick feeling in the pit of their gut. They know something is wrong. There is something wrong with this country. The problem is the two-party system, when you will find no reference to party in the Constitution of the United States of America. And there's a reason for that. That's why I talked about the other things that I talked about prior, and you can go back and hopefully TiVo that. But, you know, as far as I wanted to throw in, you know, the privatization with workers' comp, DOH, the IT of the state of West Virginia, we've got some serious privatization going on. Minimum wage, we need a living wage for the citizens of this nation and the citizens of the state of West Virginia. We have answers. There are possibilities that simply have no political will being exercised.
I'm sorry, Mr. Becker, your 1 minute.
Thank you, West Virginia University and School of Journalism and the Associated Press for sponsoring this debate. The U.S. Senate is regarded as the world's greatest deliberative body because their rules allow virtually unlimited debate on any topic. I only wish that I had had more time here tonight to do that. So in lieu of that, I would like to direct the audience to my campaign site, jeffbecker.us. An easy way to get there is just go to constitutionparty.com and link through our state site. Elbridge Gerry was one of our great patriots, and he said that the people are uninformed and can be easily misled by designing men. And George Santayana said that those who do not remember their history are doomed to repeat it. If you've heard anything here that you like tonight, please visit my website, jeffbecker.us. Learn more and get involved. I seek to be your next U.S. Senator for West Virginia, and I ask for your vote on Election Day. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Mr. Manchin.
6 years ago, when I asked to be governor, I wanted to work with you to build West Virginia back again because I knew we were better. And we did that. We brought all sides together. We didn't put our political parties first or our political ambitions. We put our state first. In Washington, with the loss of Senator Byrd, there are so great many challenges that we have. I want to go there to take the common sense approach that we brought to West Virginia. I want to take it to Washington. This can be fixed. This is a great country. And I will be independent. I've always been independent. I believe in West Virginia so much, and we've worked so well together. And when you see what's happening in this country, I'm as mad as you are. When they put their parties first and they put their own ambitions before they put this country, that's got to change. That's not how you fix things in West Virginia. I believe in you, and I'm asking you to believe in me.
I want to thank our candidates and our panelists for a lively and informative discussion. I'm sorry we were not able to get to everyone with every question. And I want to thank you, our audience, for watching and listening to tonight's debate. Good night.